been worked on for hundreds of years or thousands, but this is my last little project. First of all, are there any? I guess there are a couple of geologists in the room. Maybe I'm not a geologist. I play one on YouTube, but I'm not a real geologist. But I am doing some citizen science here. I guess that's the way to describe it. I grew up in Sandpoint, worked in a lot of different industries, spent the last 15 or 20 years in the U.S. intelligence community, retired here a few years ago back to Liberty Lake. So this is kind of, what do you do in your retirement? Well, you find geology, I guess. This is largely driven out of the work that Nick Zentner has been doing over the years, and you probably have heard of Nick or seen him on TV. The COVID pandemic pushed him out of the classroom and into his backyard with a cell phone duct taped to a ladder, and he starts broadcasting local geology, and he's been doing that for 5 or 6 years, and it's almost developed into an industry now in terms of what he's been working on. But this was some work that supported his Ice Age Floods series of lectures last winter. He does these A to Z series, which is 26 lectures that he puts together every year over the winter. They're on YouTube. And last year's topic was the Ice Age Floods. Well, haven't we already done that a few times? Haven't we heard everything? Well, no. This has got a twist to it, and there's actually been a lot of new development coming up in the floods. So tonight I want to talk about that a little bit. We're going to a little bit about who's Harlen Bretz. You probably have all heard that story 100 times, and there's the books back there, and there's the books up here. Joseph Pardee was a little bit of a lesser figure and not that much into the history books, but we've come to find out now that he's playing a little bit bigger role than we originally thought. And all this is driven by, wasn't really necessarily the discovery of all of their field notes, but finally getting access to all of the notes that they made 100 years ago when they were out in the field. Heretofore, very few people could even get to them because they were buried in research libraries, and they were not online. These were all paper documents. So through the work of a number of volunteers over the last year or two, we've opened up a wealth of new information with the field notes for both of those gentlemen. I'll talk about the field notes a little bit, and then really taking those field notes and moving them through a generation of technology, I guess, and moving those field notes onto Google Earth and onto the internet. And we'll talk about that. And then what that does let us go is let us finally see where they were actually doing their work and what they were looking at, and we can visit those places. Nick's audience is worldwide. He has right now about 99,800 subscribers, that's not a small audience. He does several videos a week. Typically his programs or his online lectures, there's 1,000 people from all over the world listening in real time, and then thousands watch it later. So it is truly an international audience. A lot of people can't get to the scablands. I mean, that's just not available for people who live in the Netherlands or in anywhere in the world. So Google Earth lets them fly to the scablands and visit them. So we'll do a little bit of touring there on that. So floods right here at the library. How deep was the water here? Yes, it was wet here. We're at about 1,900 feet elevation, 1945 at the library here. The glacial Lake Columbia, which was kind of a standing lake during part of the floods, was at 2,400 foot elevation. And the maximum flood depth was about 2,600 feet of water when at the highest levels. So that puts us, you could do the math, we're under 600 feet of water here temporarily during the flood. So it was deep here. And I'll show a little bit more in a second. And one of the things we know now, and we can trace all of it back, is erratics were one of the key indicators that they used to figure out where the floods were and weren't. And erratics are rocks that are not part of the local bedrock that got brought there by some other mechanism. And we have notes from Joseph Pardee in 1923 where he's up in the Saltese uplands and he's looking for erratics in that area. And you can go out and find those exact erratics today. There's our dog standing on one of them there. These field notes let us go back to exactly the spots that they saw. We're looking, there's a project underway to start sampling some of these erratics and get true dates off of them. So these notes are being in use all the way. So the Bretz story is pretty well known, and again, we've got the books, but got his PhD from University of Chicago, went back out to Seattle to teach for a year at University of W. Didn't really get along with their teaching style. They didn't like to go out in the field. They wanted to do geology in the classroom. He wanted to get out in the field, so he went back to Chicago and spent his career out there. His field work here was exhaustive and extensive, over 300 days of field work over the time he was here, 1922 to 1929, and then he came back in 1952 to redo some of that work. First paper was in 23, and he had about 18 papers after that. Quite controversial, his thoughts about how the geology committee or the community at the time really believed in that geology happened very slowly over time, and they had kind of theories for that. And the idea that the scablands could be created in just a couple days just didn't fit with how geology is supposed to work. So it was quite controversial, but at the end he was proven wrong, and his only disappointment is he outlived the people who said he was wrong. And he wanted to gloat, I guess, a little bit over that. So his field notes, again, Nick's had his YouTube videos for several years. He's been rewarded and awarded for the work he's doing to really provide a new outreach and new ideas in teaching geology. The A to Z series I talked about. The Bretz archives and Bretz's papers were given to the University of Chicago, and without saying too much about librarians because I'm standing in a library, it was difficult to get to those papers. They were protecting those papers. I'm not sure for whom, but they were protecting the papers, and it took quite a bit of work to actually get access to them, get them scanned in, and make them available to the public. Nick found a direct relative that gave us, we got into copyright and a whole bunch of other stuff, but we got through it, and we got about 900 pages of scanned field notes from Bretz. And then somehow Nick talked me into, said, well, could you do 1922, find some of those places, like, okay. And then he said, well, what about the other 10 years? Like, what about them? You didn't tell me there was going to be all that coming. So it was many months, probably close to 6 months worth of work to get through all of those field notes. And then, of course, as soon as he got done with those, then we found the Pardee ones. We started all over again. But so that's a little bit of the backstory on those field notes. And I'll get back to him. But Pardee's similar story, I guess. I mean, back in Salt Lake City, he was a miner first and did a lot of actual practical mining before he became a field geologist for the USGS. But he graduated from UC Berkeley, 1891. But it really was not a college degree. It was kind of he didn't have enough credits. Big surprise, to get a full degree, but he went and worked in mines for a number of years, and then kind of had a career change in 1908, started doing volunteer work in Montana for the USGS, got hired then as a full-time geologist in 1910, and he turned right around and dumped out a complete paper. I think he's probably writing it all the way along, and he dumped out his first flood paper. In fact, that was May and June of 1910. The drawing, and part of it, the Cowell Buttes, which turns out to be right in his backyard, he could see these strand lines from floods, or not from floods, but from Glacial Lake, right from his house when he lived in Montana. And I've seen that. I've actually seen the actual pen drawing. It's over in the museum or the library at in Montana, in Butte, Montana, the Mining Museum, and I got over there last fall to look at his papers. But he did that work. But again, 1910, already talking about an ice-dammed Lake Missoula. That early on. The Pardee notes then, working with Jim O'Connor, is the gentleman on the left, Vic Baker, Richard Waite. This is the brain trust for Ice Age floods. And if you've read all the papers, and these gentlemen basically wrote the books. Both Vic and Richard knew Bretz. They met him personally. They worked with him. But Jim is a person who, in talking with him last spring, we just thought that there was something more out there of the Pardee stuff. There's more to that story, that he was not just a bit player in all this. And so we did a hunt and found him and got him shipped to Portland. Got an intern to scan them in, and now those are online as well. So both the Bretz notes are online at Nick's site, and I'll show you where those are, and I have the Pardee notes available online as well. I'm in digital. So I went through and did the same thing with those, about 400 sites of Pardee's place. His Bretz's notes were chronological, and it was very easy just to follow him day to day to day to day and where he was. Pardee didn't do it that way. He organized his notes by topic. So he would have glacial erratics, and he would have strand lines, and he would have moraines. And if he saw a moraine in 1922, he would write it, and then another moraine in 1924. And so they were all out of sync or out of whack. But once we got him into Google Earth, then we can then resort by date and follow him through his travels. So that really helped to do it that way. So Pardee was also, he was a Bretz, because he was a university professor, could do his research and kind of focus on one particular area. Pardee was a working geologist who had assignments and got sent out in the field to do this, do that, all sorts of things. One of the things that in his files was this brochure about finding oil in Spokane, and they were basically finding oil investors to take their money, but oh well. There was quite a scam going on in Spokane for a while with oil wells, but. So yeah, this is just in the basement of a house over on, I've got a picture of it here, but yeah, he got sent out to check and see if there's oil in Spokane. And this crumpled up paper was in his field notes. So he, in 1921, he was sent out there to check it out. And then the newspaper wrote a big article about the oil and not being there. I'd say, yeah, it's probably not going to happen. But so he was doing other things besides flood. We were finally able to look at their field work and find out when they were here and if there was a chance that they ever met. They were never here in Spokane at the same time. They were close. They missed each other within weeks a couple of times, but they never met face to face out here. There was a school teacher named Thomas Large who we really think served as an intermediary. He was kind of a local fixer besides the high school teacher, and he did a fair amount of research himself. But he played a role between the two, and he drove them around. He showed them where to go. I'm sure that he talked back and forth with them and say, "Hey, Bretz was looking at this. Maybe you want to see that too." But we do know that Pardee was out in the field in the Spokane area for almost 150, 160 days before Bretz even got here. Now, not specifically looking for floods, but he was a geologist and he took notes of these things as he drove by. So these are, he was making observations and not necessarily geared to a particular paper. He was just writing things down, and then now we have access to them. But we can see that Pardee really only had about 4 papers in 1910, in 1925. And in 1940 and 1942, which is when he had his final Glacial Lake Missoula. Pardee, Bretz, his first paper started in 1923 when he put out his first channeled scabland paper. So they did have overlapping field work, but from all the notes and stuff, we never have them in the same room at the same time or at the same date. Now they went to the same places, Pantops, for instance, over in the valley. Everybody went to Pantops to look at the channel there. Bretz was all over the place. I mean, he was up in Canada, he was over on the coast, he was down in southern Idaho, he was over in Montana. Again, he was in Canada trying to find the sources of the flood. There was various theories about that, whether it was just the ice sheets melting, either fast or slow, whether or not there was a volcano under the ice that melted all the ice and all the water came down, or there was a flood. So he was checking all that out over his 11 field years. The best we can guess, more than 20,000 miles worth of travel through all of that. And again, this was not freeway travel. This was not highway travel. This was trains and planes, or trains and boats and horses and what was available in the 1920s. So they did a lot of work just from the trains. Again, in 1920, there were not that many roads out here. And trains were one of the major ways you got around this country. And he was straight up front of it. We're to observation car platform geology. He was pretty straightforward about that. But we have gone through and we looked at the railroad maps and we were able to chart another Zentnerd was able to take my pins and put in the routes and figure out in 1922 and 1923 when he did most of his work by trains. In 24 and 25, he has a car and was out here driving around more, but the trains were what he rode the first a couple of years out here. But he didn't start riding by the trains. Pardee was riding by the trains years before. So he's on the CM and St. Paul Railroad, CM, I'm trying to remember which one it is. Yes, that's right, Milwaukee, yeah. And he's taking the train from Spokane west in 1917 to look at stuff. They rode a stagecoach. This is 1920. We were flying planes across the Atlantic. We got world wars and planes and stuff like that, and they're still running stagecoaches out of Washington State. It's just really kind of amazing. The Uber of stagecoaches. So out by Chehalis and Morton, 1920, he's riding stagecoaches still. It kind of blew my mind. Pardee got around by boats down in Coeur d'Alene. If he the train went to St. Mary's, but he took the Flyer, which was a steamboat that ran regular routes on Coeur d'Alene Lake back in 1910. So we were able to track some of his travels. Back to Bretz's field notes. Again, he'd had prior exhaustive field notes. 1927 is kind of what I call his revenge tour because of the meeting earlier on where they questioned his work. He came back out in a vengeance and spent weeks and weeks and weeks out in the field and went everywhere to relook at these places and make his case. Bretz's field notes, some of them were cursive, some of them were text. And some of them were damn hard to read. And one of the things we really kind of want to do this is there's a generation of kids now that can't read cursive. We'd show them this and it'd be like Latin or some other language, but I can't read this. So by getting this into Google Earth and getting it into text, we've hopefully moved it forward. I've been able to run the text notes through an AI engine and do the text extraction and make the printed notes searchable now. I tried the handwriting and we're not mature enough with AI yet to be able to read his handwriting. It still requires the old human eyeball to interpret those. But the handwriting is, it took some squinting on some of those to, I mean, my mother had bad writing, but I could read her letters, but this was a whole new level of that. This is what some of us will sort of call a smoking gun, though, for Pardee. And this was in 1920, again, 2 years before Bretz is here. And Pardee is already seeing that glacial floods cause the scablands. The problem is that he never wrote it, he never put it in the paper. He never published first. Pardee or Bretz got published first, but it's pretty clear here that when he came down to that area, and Ewan is right at the south end of Rock Lake, so kind of down by Sprague, actually I'll switch and show you where it is, but we'll switch to Google Earth, and we'll fly down to where Pardee was. And he's, and we also know because of his travels, we know he came down, this is 23, and we know he was driving from Steptoe to Ewan that day. So we know he came right down this road, came around the corner, and then just saw all the scabland and wrote his notes on. Oops, hang on, get back to the. And today you can make that same drive. And this is the corner where he came around and kind of saw it all laid out in front of him. So it's really been kind of fun to find these spots where he was and go back and visit them to do that. One of the things that the Ice Age Floods Institute does is, we do tours around the area, and some of you, maybe all of you, have taken those walking tours. We're working on a new tour this year that will take us to some of these actual observation sites. So you'll get to walk them too, which is we think is kind of exciting about that. Some of the notes were just routine, out in the field type of stuff. This is Bretz's shopping list for groceries, for 2 breakfasts he's got 8 quarts of pancake mix, a large slab of bacon, 50 spoonfuls of coffee, a pint of sugar for the coffee. 2 cans of milk, and 3 quarts of syrup. These guys like syrup on their pancakes. I tell you, they were drinking syrup. But and then supper, 2 quarts of farina. That's malto meal. Who eats malt? Well, I guess some people eat malto meal for dinner, but that was what they were eating out in the field. And so some of these notes were not all geology, but they really kind of fill in the story a little bit about what it was like for them out in the field. he wrote notes about it. If he didn't see anything, he still wrote a note about this. There's just nothing to see here, folks. And I guess if you've driven down to Squitsy, you probably would agree. There's not much to see, but he said it's just plain, and I get nothing for me to see here. So Bretz and the USGS did not get along. I guess this is a short way of saying it. And so there was the famous meeting in January of 1927 where he went back to Washington and tried to not necessarily defend, but to make his case about why we had floods, and that meeting did not go well from Bretz's perspective. So he went back and did his 27 revenge tour, but his notes were a little bit snarky from time to time. One flood is bad enough. Ask the USGS. There's justification for two. And then in 1929, after going down, and this is down at Burlingame Canyon, but realizing that I regret to announce that there were probably multiple floods, but just his snark sort of fell out in his notes a little bit. But Bretz did, in reading his notes, Pardee's notes were very technical and short observations. Bretz had this chain of consciousness that when he started writing, his notes were almost ready for publication. As he's writing, he's thinking this stuff through, and he's writing complete sentences and making hypotheses, and there are places that I've seen in the papers that he's written that I can take them right back to the field notes, and it's almost verbatim right out of his notes. Now, what we think happened though is that he may have had earlier notes in handwriting, but that either each night in camp, or his son Rudolph said that when he was riding the train back to Chicago, he would type the notes up later. We're not sure. So how the typewritten part, when it happened, we're not quite sure. We did find the typewriter though, the typewriter that he used. I don't have a slide for here, but yeah, it was a World War I leftover surplus Monarch typewriter that there was only one of 3 typewriters of that kind at the University of Chicago. They apparently had a rash of typewriter thefts back in the 1920s, so Bretz hid the typewriter in his office, forgot that he'd hid it, reported it stolen, and then when he was cleaning his office years later, found the typewriter that he'd hid away in his old office. So he didn't have his typewriter then. These notes got a little bit personal actually for me. This was kind of a fun one, but I'm working these nights late at night, and I'm almost the next to the last page, and it's midnight or something. I'm trying to get through it, and all of a sudden he's up on Lake Pend Oreille, and he's on the south end of the Pack River Road, Pack River Crossing, which is not there anymore. But as I got to try to locate this, I realized this is on my parents' property, and that my grandparents right down the road were there in 1920 and likely met him. So because out in that area in Pack River, there was not much there. So there was a pile of gravel or pile of glacial drift right at the end of the driveway, and he had to stop there. So this got really kind of interesting and personal when I found out that he had been to my parents' and my grandparents' house. So Google Earth and Google Earth Pro. Google Earth came out, like say, around 2003 when the software was first written. It's called Keyhole at the time. One of my jobs was to find commercial technology and bring it into the intelligence community. And so Google Earth is one of the applications that I worked with and got some money from the agency. And we funded the development of the Binford 500 version of Google Earth that do quite a bit of work with put security clearance stuff on it and so forth. And came out with that, and right after the software was released, Hurricane Katrina came out, and they needed a way to view the maps and things, so it got moved from the classified world into the unclassified world very quickly and became quite popular and became a commercial product and is a foundation tool for that. But it's right now it's all free. I mean, the Google Earth Pro, you can go get that from this website and or the iPad version or the iPhone version. There's also My Maps, which lets you do that. So using Google, so like I say, a lot of experience with Google Earth, and it seemed to be when Nick said, I need to find these places, why not put them in Google Earth? So we're going to kind of go a little bit of tour of Google Earth. This is one of Bretz's maps, hand-drawn maps in 1928. He did not have aerial photographs. He was never up on an airplane in those days. This is all done on the ground by his ways of getting around. And we'll switch over to Google Earth here. And what I want to do is back out of this. Out, show this map. We have it here. What I did with the map, there it is. What we're going to do, hide the Pardee stuff. Do a little bit of futz with this, but we can see this map. And what I can do is fade the map out, and you can see just how perfect he was lining up all those channels, how accurate he was from 1928 without having aerial photographs or anything else. To be able to trace all that flood work in is just astounding what his work was. So back out of that. So a couple things with Google Earth. Again, locating all of those places. We can turn on the Bretz field notes, turn that off, turn the map off. Turn that off. And you can see, I want to do one other way here. So this is the, turn the Pardee places on. We can see that Pardee was pretty well around the Spokane area. He was down in, obviously down in Montana, but Pardee was doing a lot of work in this area, but nowhere near what Bretz did. Click it again. There we go. Just amazing amount of work that he was that he had covered. The difference between the pins, the color of the pins, is when we first started doing this, I was trying to get these spots close enough. This was just sort of for the average user to kind of get and visit some of those sites. But it turns out that this has got to be more valuable, and people are using it for actual field research now. So I'm having to go back in and validate. So the blue pins are ones I've actually been on the ground and verified that that's where he was. The green ones, I got a little work to do yet. So I might have a few years worth of work here yet. But it's just amazing how much work he did and where he was to gather the data. To make the case for these floods. It is just astounding. And where, I mean, he's already on the coast. And again, this is through 10 years of field work. It's just astounding what's happened there. So all of these pins are clickable, and you can actually read the short detail of his notes, and then there's a clickable link here that takes you right to the spot in the field notes, so you can go straight to the notes. So if you want to, if you're so inclined, you can do this. You can also, with Google Earth, it lets you fly around, so you can pick a year, and it will automatically let you. I think we're over in Montana right now, but it will fly you to the spot and show you what he saw. Red Rock Pass. This is 26, and then it will just you can set the timing on Google Earth, and then it will fly you to the next spot, and you can just follow his entire field season if you're so inclined by just letting it fly you around, and you can I don't know what that is, but so all of these. So if you're so inclined to see where he did or where he went and what he saw, this is a pretty cool way to do it and to use Google Earth. One of the things we've also done, hit stop here, is back out, hide that. Is get to the spot here. I've hit messed up my screen. We've been able to take some data, some synthetic aperture radar data from a 1993 space shuttle mission. And look at a couple different areas where he was and do some additional analysis. Again, this is, you're looking at Pardee Lake. This is LiDAR data that's been worked with to colorize it and do some additional work. But what you can see here, this is Bayview. Bretz was sort of all around this area here, but you can see the flood channels. You can see giant current ripples over by Spirit Lake, where the gravel has been, as the water was going through there, and I mean, you've seen little current ripples on the beach. These are a tad bigger. But you can see as the subsequent channels have been eroded. You can see all of this is the Kokolala lobe of the ice sheet that came down through here, and you can just see where the ice came down and carved through that. Here's sand points right here. Sand points right here. But you can see how much the ice sculpted. This is Gold Hill or Gold Mountain. How much the ice sculpted that terrain. The ice dam. Here's Clark Fork. The ice dam was, somewhere in this area. But we can also see some of the other artifacts. Go down to, for instance, here. This is the little town of Bayview. These big dents are kettles. They're called kettles. And they're the result of chunks of ice from the glacier getting buried in all the debris, all the rocks and gravel and stuff. And the flood goes by and then they melt out later. This little divot here, that is the Farragut State Park Amphitheater. That huge amphitheater that you see that seats 40,000 people was a chunk of ice at one point. And then these colks are and you can see this, you've been on the Farragut, those little racetracks that were the old things. Well, you can see this is the gun range right here, but you can just see how large those are. But the interesting thing is when you turn it off from the regular aerial photography, you can't see anything. So we've been using that to help to look through and study some of this material. This is an area that we're actually going to be looking at this year. The lines is these are terminal moraine through here, and then these are recessional moraines. And you had an ice sheet come this way, And you also had an ice sheet come this way. You had basically a head-on collision with two ice sheets in there. So we've never not really seen that before. So that's going to be an area that a couple of people are going to be checking out this summer to find out exactly what they have. We've had a hard time. This is Simpson Lumber Company product. We've been having a hard time trying to get access up in there, but we want to see if we can see those on the ground and look into that. But this really gives you a little bit better understanding of where the floods came through here, and how the channels it carved just through the Rathdrum Prairie on into Spokane. See that, hide that. We're on time. Okay, we're doing okay on time. You can see those. So we've got the field notes and the Pardee work. We've been working with some of the ice sheet margins as well, and to try to figure out where. Let me turn some of this stuff off. It gets kind of cluttered after a while with all the data we have in here. But we've been working on refining these old maps to try to figure out exactly where the ice margins were, and then one of the challenges with the floods is, particularly in terms of how many there were, is they had a tendency to wipe out the evidence of the previous flood, and if we had ice sheets either 65,000 years ago or 120,000 years ago. There were multiple ice advances over the last 2 million years of the Ice Age. And about every geologist who's been working this finds a different margin. But we're trying to get some of them corrected and trying to figure out who's got the right margin. This map was one that Bretz had done in 1924, I think, and he had the ice margin all the way down by Cheney. The blue line is the earlier one. This red line here is one. There was a geologist named Richard Foster Flint who, well, he was I don't say a nemesis of Bretz, but they didn't get along all that well, and a lot of professional arguments over this and that. So Flint had a margin down here, Bretz is here, and some of the more current workers are putting margins up in here. But we're already seeing that if this is the ice margin, what caused all this then? I don't think that should have been under ice as well, but the margin that somebody drew cut that out. So we're going to, even this new imagery lets us kind of rethink how we've done that. So that's one of the things that we're starting to work on as well. This is still an active working project, I guess. Again, this is a group of geologists that were here last May, getting out in the field. This is, pretty much the brain trust of Ralph Hagerud and Jerome Lessman, Nick and Richard and Vic and Jim O'Connor. That collective group of people know more about the floods than anybody. But they're out in the field again, and what we've been doing is taking them around to the Bretz sites. They didn't know where they were either. Vic Baker written 1,500 papers on this stuff. Never seen the notes, or he did not. He may have seen the notes, but he never got them located to where it actually was. So we're still working. And this is really cool too. He's the one that used this flood work to figure out that we had floods on Mars. The same scabland landforms that you saw here are the same things you see on Mars. And he led that. He led the team on Mars, and you can see some of these scabland features where water came down through here on Mars, and that's kind of almost blows your mind a little bit on that. So, okay, so where can we find out more about this material? Ice Age Floods Organization has a lot of it, and I'll show you just a second. But so the Floods Organization, Nick has his material, and of course his YouTube channel. So go to again this is the Ice Age Floods website. We have this is a Google My Maps. You don't even have to load up Google Earth here. You could just start clicking on them and going here and visit these sites. We've got a number of other maps: Pardee, field sites around Spokane, Sir Foster Flint. We now got scanned in Bretz's memoirs. There were paper copies floating around that people had a few copies, but we've got those scanned in now. All of the so Google Earth saves its files. It's called KML format, Keyhole Markup Language, but you can now download those files and load them on your own Google Earth and play with it at home. So those files are all out on there. Nick's YouTube site, and there's he's at 99.9 now, so 999 or 99,900 subscribers, 600 videos. So there's a lot of material out there. So that the whole flood series is there, and then on Nick's website, he has. These are all of the papers that are related to his floods, and you can download all those. And then the back up here, the Bretz tab. Here's also the Google Earth files, but there's a lot of his field books. All the Bretz raw material is out here. So this is a huge library that we've never had before. Never had online, that you can now get access to, and do your own research, read the papers, and explore them as you want. Lastly, we did a little movie the Google Earth has got a lot of horsepower behind it, so one of the other Zet nerds and I decided we were going to make a movie of some of these sites with just using Google Earth and fly it. So we're going to play this movie here for you with Nick doing a little introduction.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Glenn. And without further ado, let's start the movie. Hope you enjoy.
that's kind of some of the fun things you can do with Google Earth and do the fly around. So that's a little bit about what we've been working on with the notes and from Bretz, Pardee. We've been getting some other ones with Thomas Large and some of the other players too, but to continue to work through what caused the floods, how many were they, where they started, where the ice sheets were, where they weren't. Just a lot more questions that are still out there. But these notes have helped do that. We're going back to some of those original spots and looking at the glacial drift and till to see if it matches some other things that people are looking for. So those old sites have value still. And then for the people who are interested in this whole, in the Ice Age floods, now you can go back and see those same spots, either visit them from your home computer or use them to get out there and drive and look around and see that. I mean, a lot of people don't realize when they drive to Seattle, I mean, Frenchman Coulee is a mile off of I-90. You just take a quick exit there and all of a sudden you're right in the middle of it. So a lot of these spots are pretty accessible. So we're doing, we're working on a tour again of some of these spots in the local area for later this year for the Ice Age floods. We do have a bunch of books back in the back and brochures. If you're interested, stop by Dawn's table before you leave and visit the website. And if you got questions, I'll take questions now.